Happening now on Grid Tonight. After several hours of waiting, we finally got cars on track for Wednesday's practice session at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, who was able to take advantage of today's track time in practice for the Indianapolis 500. Supercar star Cam Waters will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut at Sonoma. How will he perform with RFK Racing? NASCAR will debut a brand new in-season tournament in summer 2025 on TNT. What new elements will this add to the racing? Hello to all of our viewers watching here in the United States and around the world. Welcome to Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. I'm Kobe Lambeth. With me are Ben Snyder from Grid Encore and LastCar.info and Matt White from Grid Endurance Performance Index. We encourage everyone to comment in the chat below, ask questions, support us through Super Chat. Now here's Ben with our top story this evening.
Thank you, Kobe. Well, at the moment, Wednesday's Indy 500 practice session is still going on because the session has been extended to 7 p.m. Eastern Time due to continued weather delays. Entering the final hour of the day, all three of Team Penske's cars are inside the top five. Scott McLaughlin is the fastest. Will Power is second, and Joseph Newgarden is currently fourth. We'll see if anyone else can go faster than them in the final hour, weather permitting. Now, yesterday, this show, Grid Tonight, mentioned the fact that everyone will be watching the Penske team carefully to see how they exit from the push-to-pass controversy. Now all three of the cars look very fast, and the photo on your screen is courtesy Paul Hurley of Penske Entertainment. Kobe, are today's practice speeds a statement by Team Penske that no matter what they're facing, they can overcome any obstacle?
Well, given that Team Penske has suspended key members of their team, I think they're operating under the next man up mentality. I know Team Penske, they have a lot of talent at each level of their organization, so next man up is really a thing there. And people were wondering, without Joseph Newgarden, Will Power having the same people in their ear helping them along during the month of May, would it lead to a drop of performance? And based on what we've seen in practice today, absolutely not. Team Penske has not missed a beat at all, and I expect this to continue for the rest of the week whenever we do get on track running. That Team Penske is in with the practice speeds we're seeing today, that no matter what, as you said, they can overcome any single obstacle despite losing key members of their team.
Yeah, absolutely right, Kobe. Hello, everybody. Good evening, guys. Not surprised to see Penske going quickly today. They've obviously got good equipment. We've seen that over the last however many years, and of course they're the defending race champions with Joseph Newgarden last year. Excuse me. So not surprising to see them up there towards the top, but it's with what little running we had yesterday, it's really the first chance that anyone's had a good long run to see what their cars are all about, and that will of course roll into the next couple of days as well and into qualifying. So I don't think we can read too much into it yet. I think towards the weekend it'll be a bit more clearer where we are in terms of some kind of pecking order. But for the team to come out and roll out with some quick cars, that will give them a bit of a pep in their step, I guess, after the turmoil that we've been talking about on the show for the last few weeks.
Well, let's talk about the team that inherited that victory that Joseph Newgarden was disqualified from. Of course, that was Pato O'Ward with Arrow McLaren, and spinning up and down start to the season for them. They're looking to build some momentum. Now, at the moment, Alexander Rossi and O'Ward are both inside the top 10. Kyle Larson attempting the double this year. He's currently 15th fastest, while Callum Ilott is just outside of the top 20. Matt, in the last few years, this team, particularly Pato O'Ward's number 5 crew, they've been one of the favorites on race day. Do you anticipate the same being true this year in 2024?
Yeah, more than likely. Yeah, he'll be there at the end. He was last year, of course, until he got tangled up in the accident late on. McLaren, I think, as a collective, will be strong. Alex Rossi's sort of towards the top end in the timesheets as well, or was just before we came on air anyway. Good run from Larson so far. He's learning with every lap, and he was second at the very beginning of the session. Got right out there and got on the pace very early, and obviously has trickled down the way the session has rolled through. But O'Ward will certainly be in the mix come Sunday week. We've still got plenty of time for, as mentioned in the Penske answer, really, everyone to tweak their cars and get them right where they need to be. But I feel like it looks like very early in the practice week that it's maybe a four-way shootout between Penske, Ganassi, McLaren, and the Andretti team, because Colton Hurst has been pretty quick today as well.
Yeah, and looking at this Aaron McLaren group, especially Pato Award, I think after what's happened, last couple of years with Pato Award, he has something to prove, especially with the moves that he's made in Indy 500 in the last couple of editions. You remember when he went on the outside of Marcus Ericsson, and people were like, "This is for the Indy 500. Why on earth would you lift an outside?" And Pato just wanted to bring home a clean car, and then we all know what happened recently when Award went underneath him and ended up crashing. And people are like, "What are you doing? You don't need to be aggressive this soon." So he's been criticized for not being aggressive enough on the outside, and he's been criticized for being too aggressive on the inside. So I think Pato is going to use that type of stuff as motivation to go out there and prove that he can win this Indianapolis 500-mile race. And I believe that he will be in the mix once again this year.
Lots of great storylines around both of those teams. And of course, if something major happens on track while we're on the air here in the last hour, we will discuss it right here and keep you updated later in the show. But again, the weather looks like it might get in the way of that, but we'll keep an eye on that for you. And if we're still on the air by the end of practice, we will give you a full rundown of the fastest drivers from Wednesday. In the meantime, we move on now to our second story. The Repco Supercars Championship star Cam Waters will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut on June 9th at Sonoma Raceway. Waters will drive the number 60 Ford for RFK Racing as part of the Stage 60 program. BuildSubmarines.com will sponsor the car, highlighting AUKUS, which is a trilateral security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The Tickford Racing regular has competed in 2 Truck Series races with ThorSport Racing, those being Martinsville and Kansas. Waters called the opportunity to race in the Cup Series a dream come true, and he's excited to put his road course racing skills to the test after racing on 2 ovals in the Truck Series. Graphic on your screen, courtesy of RFK Racing. Now, we also have another Supercars regular coming over. Will Brown announced a short while ago that he's making his Cup Series debut at Sonoma as well with Richard Childress Racing. Matt, what do you expect from both Supercars regulars in their Cup debuts? And could the additional NASCAR starts for Waters mean that we'll eventually see him leave Supercars and come stateside?
The Australian invasion continues, doesn't it? With the Kiwi, Van Gisbergen last year and Brody Kostecki. And now we're getting Cam Waters and Will Brown. Excited for both of them to see how they go. Of course, as you mentioned, Ben, we've seen Cam already stateside this year with these runs at Martinsville and at Kansas, but this is something very different. And a track he obviously doesn't know, in a setup, I guess, with the car that he won't know either. But as we saw with both those guys last year, SVG and Brody, it didn't take them long to get up to speed, and Brody had a good run in his only start at Indy on the road course. So 2 very talented guys, race winners, both of them in the Supercars Championship. And of course, as you mentioned, Will Brown, the current points leader, going into this weekend's round at Perth. So very excited to see how they do. Will this be a bit of a fun day out for both of them? And if they're both racing for the win at the end, that'll be interesting. It could happen. You never know. Let's see. I mean, good to see that RFK have took up the mantle from Trackhouse with their project car that since Van Gisbergen won in it, that's gone away, hasn't it? It's not been mentioned since. So it looks like Brad and team down there at RFK have picked up the mantle of having the guest car, potentially. We'll see if that continues through the year, in a big week for them, of course, as well. So, yeah, very excited to see both Waters and Brown coming across to mix it up with NASCAR's best.
Yeah, well, 2311 too. They've had their third car.
Yeah, cool.
Kobe's going to follow up with that here a little bit later on in the show. Corey Hahn getting in that seat, and the 50/67. You think back to a couple races they did last year. So we'll see if the Project 91 car comes back. But in the meantime, we have the Stage 60 and the 50 for 2311 holding down the fort for those extra cars for us. Adam Lemery's can't wait to see Cam Waters and Will Brown at Sonoma. Going to be awesome. Fingers crossed, all goes according to plan. I will be there with Brock Beard, and we'll be sure to keep an eye on that. Hopefully, for their sake, he's not writing an article on them at the end of the Cup Series race. But sure, there's gonna be a lot of eyes on those 2 drivers for sure as they make their Cup debuts. But Matt, just to follow up, I know we were talking about this a little bit backstage, but what is it that's going on in Supercars right now that you think is causing this invasion from down under with so many of these stars coming over? Obviously, SVG winning at Chicago, I think, opened the floodgates for that. But we saw it with Marcus Ambrose, a little more than a decade ago. He had some modest success here, but there's recently been, I guess, 4 now drivers that have come over, and tried their hand in NASCAR Cup. What do you think it is? Is it the fact that the next gen car resembles the new Gen 3 car in supercars, or do you think it's the current state of a series that's leading them over here to give NASCAR a try?
Yeah, I guess Ambrose was a bit of an outlier, wasn't he? He was on his own there in the mid to late 2000s and such like. And then we've had a bit of a lull in it. But now what we had, the last two champions and the current points leader coming across in the space of 12 months, plus Cam Waters. What is it? I don't know. The new gen cars, that they're not new anymore for both of them, really, for supercars and for the Cup Series, are quite similar in design and how they drive. So that's one thing. But I think the main thing is the calendar. Supercars calendar down to 11 events this year. The fifth one of it, coming up this weekend at Perth. We'll get to that when we get to pick a winner later on. But then they've got another month off again until they're back in action next. So there's these huge, massive gaps in between the calendar, and these guys just want to race. And outside of with NASCAR, I guess we've got Cup, Trucks, Xfinity all on the same weekend or intermingling with each other. Whereas once there's no supercars on in Australia, really there isn't another high level series that they could go and run in. Of course, we've seen Brown and Mostert this year already run in GT World Challenge Australia at Phillip Island last month. Mostert winning one of those races. He'll be the next one. If there's going to be another one to come, it'll be Chazzy. He's done some other GT Challenge races out in Europe. He did Spa a couple of years ago for the 24 hours as well. So they're always looking for more opportunities to drive. And that was one of Shane's big points, wasn't it, when he came over or when the announcements got made last year? He just can be driving every week pretty much for the whole year. So that's what these guys want to do. And it's just another thing for supercars. I've mentioned this every time we've talked about this kind of stories. They've got a chance here of losing all of their top guys. And they need to get their ship in order pretty quickly to stop that from happening potentially. And Cam has expressed a dream or opportunities if they arose to come over and do NASCAR full time. So I mean, obviously we add McLaughlin into that mix as well as another supercars refugee in the IndyCar paddock for what's now 3 or 4 years. So they are losing the big names in supercars, and that is a bit of a worry.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that, and I think Monster coming over would certainly be a welcome sight for any supercars fans looking to see more of their drivers give this a try. And again, we'll keep an eye on how Waters and Brown do in just a few weeks' time in Sonoma. Adam also pointing out Dick Johnson made some NASCAR starts in 1989, so that's going way back to the late 80s there, rather. So yeah, not unprecedented for supercars drivers to come over, but I guess a little unprecedented for this many to come over at once at the same time here. And just the last calendar year, we're up to 4, and maybe rumors that more might be interested. So we'll keep an eye on that. In the meantime, now we move on. Matt, I know you're really excited to talk about this one. We have our hot topic tonight, some news that was announced earlier this week. In summer of 2025, when the NASCAR Cup Series returns to TNT, NASCAR will debut a brand new in-season tournament. This bracket-style tournament is a similar concept to the NBA's in-season tournament, which is designed to generate more storylines in the regular season, making a typically mundane part of the schedule more meaningful and interesting. Now, the final 3 races that air on Amazon Prime leading into TNT's coverage will set the seeding for the tournament. The top 32 drivers from those races, so almost all of the chartered entries airing on Prime Video, they will qualify for the in-season tournament that starts with TNT's first race. Seeding will be determined by each driver's best finish in the 3 Prime Video races that are a part of this, with tiebreakers determined by the next best finish, followed by season points position. The drivers will compete head-to-head with the highest finishing driver advancing over 5 rounds, with the winner of the in-season tournament winning $1 million. Now, as I said, this is a similar concept to the NBA's in-season tournament, but a lot of people are giving credit to Denny Hamlin for his bracket challenge and pushing an idea like this for NASCAR. Now, on X, Hamlin said that this is such a win for the sport and drivers because many storylines will be made during this 5-week stretch. He later went on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio and said he didn't necessarily need credit for this idea, but thinks his job is to make the sport better and believes this idea can really take off. Graphic on your screen, courtesy of NASCAR themselves. Matt, do you view the new NASCAR in-season tournament as a good, innovative idea to make the summer stretch more interesting, or do you view it as totally unnecessary?
I've lessened my comments, perhaps thinking about it today, than what I initially said yesterday when this rolled out yesterday lunchtime, your time. It is still a bit unnecessary. Call me a purist, but the season runs from February until November, playoffs or not. As I've got massive hair drama going on, playoffs or not. But why do we have to have this in the middle? Is the season that boring and that people can't keep up with a points battle or a playoff grid battle? We've already got one grid. Why do we need another bracket / grid going on at the same time? It just, I don't know. I just don't think it's necessary. What we're going to get to in, I know we've had the announcement that Atlanta's going to be the first race. That's been announced today. When we get to whatever ends up being the final race, where the two guys racing for the lead aren't the two guys left in the bracket, and we'll have to cut away to a battle between two guys running in 14th and 17th to make sure whoever wins a bracket challenge for $1 million, of which they are racing for this weekend in one single race at North Wilkesboro for the All-Star race on Sunday night, when this is spread over 4 or 5 weeks. I know this is obviously with the new TV stuff coming in next year, it is to try and get more people locked onto these new TV outputs with Amazon and TNT. I just don't think that this is needed when, again, you look at the last few weeks of the Cup Series. I know we're not in this position of being in the what you would call the summer stretch quite yet, but we've had just some awesome racing over the last couple of weeks. Why do we need to pit people against each other for a finish? And if that first race is going to be at Atlanta, where it looks like it's going to be, we could have all manner of the favourites knocked out if we get a big crash in the Atlanta race in the first race of this whole bracket challenge. I just don't think it's very necessary, and I like my championship to be run without gimmicks. Perhaps call the playoffs and the chase a gimmick if you like. Perhaps it is a kind of, after all this time, we've got used to it. I just really don't think this is something to go with. Maybe it'll just be a 1-year deal. But obviously everyone clocked onto Denny's bracket challenge a little bit last year, and he's got his other one coming up in a couple of weeks. It's been announced as well today. So we've got the unofficial one again this year before the proper official one coming in 25.
You know, Matt, I see Matthew Owens is here in the chat room. I'm wondering if we can pull his comments up here in a bit, but I'll say the same thing that I told him on an episode of my podcast we taped yesterday. I've been very busy this week. I'm hoping to get that up in the next couple of days here and get that edited and everything. But I don't know that I disagree with anything you said. I just don't share the outrage that you and Matthew were sharing when this was first announced. And I'll get to the reason why in just a second. Here's Matthew's comments tonight. Building storylines is a heck of a line. In what way is the NASCAR regular season lacking in entertainment? And it goes on here. I think we've got a couple more. Winning a meaningless tournament in a non-stick and ball sport apparently is a better storyline than trying to position yourself into the most important time of the season. And all these great battles, photo finishes, and wonderful competition, and it's not compelling enough. Again, I don't disagree with any of that. But my thing is, I think all of my outrage has been used up in the last 20 years over the chase / playoffs and the introduction of stage racing, which is basically periods or quarters or whatever. I'm not convinced that the name isn't going to change at some point, because we changed the chase to the playoffs. We changed green, white checkers to overtime. And despite the fact that Steve Phelps was quoted a few years ago as saying, we'll keep everything unique to our sport, we don't need to market this as a Game 7 moment. The fact that you've changed the names of 2 other rules that you've introduced into the sport say otherwise. But you know, I think that I've been so frustrated with that I have no frustration left for this. And you know, again, I think that there was a tweet from Chesapeake Diecast. I brought this up in my podcast yesterday. I'll bring it up here again. I thought he hit the nail right on the head. I like the in-season tournament more than the playoffs, and I don't think we need both. So to me, at the bare minimum, this isn't something that determines our champion. It's a nice little bonus payday, I guess. If I know $1 million doesn't go nearly as far as it used to, but you know, it's going to draw some storylines and engagement, and it might be a nice bonus for people to talk about. But I appreciate that it doesn't. I don't think anybody's going to elevate this people make a joke about the Lakers raising their in-season tournament banner. Even then, I think was kind of blown out of proportion because the year on the banner is a lot smaller. They only have one banner, so that if they win it again, it's just the one banner with all the years rather than individual banners for championships. Nobody's going to put this on the same level as winning a championship. So I guess to sum it all up, is it necessary? Absolutely not. Do I think brackets work in a sport as chaotic as auto racing, particularly when the first race is Atlanta of all places, and we'll get into that here in just a second. But no, of course, I would prefer that we not introduce this. I think it's gimmicky. I don't think it's necessary at all. I'm just so apathetic at this point that I'm just like, whatever. If you have a new media partner coming in, I think if there's any time to introduce something like this, give Turner and Amazon something to highlight and promote and hype up their coverage, so be it. You can go ahead and have this. I would prefer that you transfer the bracket style tournament that we have in this sport over to something like this, and we can go back to a regular season points format. But I'm told that, if we do that, we will have a champion crown with 2 races to go, and we won't have enough compelling storylines for the end of the year. So I guess that's that. But well, I don't share the outrage here. That's how I'm feeling about it. It's just kind of.
And to my point at the top, I've thought about it since this came out 24 plus hours ago. I wasn't as hair on fire as I perhaps was as soon as the news was dropped yesterday. Adam says, I'm not a fan of this season tournament either. Some NASCAR fans will be turned off. And therein lies, they need to get people to get it. The people that go, well, I'm not watching stuff on the stream, to get on board with Amazon Prime perhaps next year and have a carrot dangled, perhaps. Maybe this is my Europeanness in me, let's say, whereas obviously you've got your basketball stuff, and obviously March Madness, for instance, is obviously built off the bracket and stuff. If we'd had in the Premier League this season here in the UK, the December battle for points or some madness over the Christmas-January period, it doesn't matter because we've still got the championship coming down to 2 points difference at the end of the season on Sunday between Man City and Arsenal, which is producing all of the storylines, much like 4 people racing for a championship at Phoenix at the end of the season. F1 shouldn't have sprint races. NASCAR perhaps shouldn't have a playoff. IndyCar hasn't got double points for the 500, and still no one talks about the championship in May. Maybe that's just it goes from here to here, and at the end we crown the champ. I know this doesn't have anything to do with the championship for se, and it's kind of this separate thing rolling on the side, but I just would like perhaps the distraction of it in the summer when we could be looking at the points battle.
Yeah, and I want to be clear to people watching and people that follow me, it's not just a NASCAR thing, and I talked about this last time with Matthew too. I'd have no problem if the team with the best record in the American League and the best record in the National League and Major League Baseball, let's just take them straight to the World Series. We play 162 games. There's no need for that. Matt, you brought up the Premier League, for soccer, and the title fight between Arsenal and Man City. I've been keeping an eye on that, and I think that's part of why I've gotten into soccer over the last couple of years, and specifically the Premier League, because there are no playoffs, and yet you still have a compelling championship fight. There are still storylines for all sorts of different clinching scenarios for win, a draw, a loss, or whatever for either team. And over here on the American side of things, I think there's an argument to be made. I don't think a lot of fans make it. The MLS Cup is held in much higher prestige than the Supporters Shield, and I will make this argument because the Union have a Supporters Shield. They don't have an MLS Cup. They were about 2 minutes away from winning one, and then Gareth Bale marched down the field and did something incredible. But I'm going to go on and on about that. It's not a soccer show. It's a racing show. But, I think there's an argument to be made that the Supporters Shield is more indicative of full season, regular season success over the course of a full year as it is a knockout playoff style or bracket style playoff, rather, to determine a champion that way. So, it's a consistent view that I've held all across the board that I would like to see importance placed in the regular season. I think if you do that, you don't need an in-season tournament like this. So I think it's rather just a symptom of the fact that we've had a playoff system for 20 years. And now, we kind of have an idea. All the strong championship contenders probably have won a race by the time we get to the summer. We have an idea because, again, it's a symptom that's infecting pretty much all sports right now. There's no need for 16 drivers to be in the playoffs, right? No disrespect to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. But anyone wouldn't think after he won the Daytona 500 last year, like, oh, he's in the playoffs now. He's a real championship contender, folks. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it takes up a spot on the playoff grid. I mean, maybe he has a solid first round and gets into the second round, but it's very unlikely that he's going to the championship for, much less actually winning the thing. So, I think that if you didn't have a playoff system, this wouldn't be necessary. But because you have it, most of the drivers that are going to be true title contenders, they've won their way in by now. And it's the summer months. We're all just kind of waiting to get to the playoffs, and we're figuring out who's going to be in, who's going to be out in those final seeds at this point. But again, like I said, if you're going to do it, I prefer you have your bracket style, for lack of, I'm sorry, I know people don't like this word, but your gimmick, for lack of better terms, in the summer months, then it be what actually determines the champion. And I think that's just where I fall on this. And so that's why it doesn't bother me as much as people might think, given how staunchly opposed I am to the playoff system. Before we move on, Matthew adding here, what happens if we get the 25 schedule and one of these races is the Brickyard 400? You mean to tell me we'll all care more about the bracket than who's going to win in Indianapolis? Well, again, I think that's an important part of it as well, is what races are we going to have here as a part of this tournament. I think those need to be strategically chosen. I don't think Crown Jewel should be any of those. To Matthew's point here, I would not want the battle for 15th, which might determine $1 million jackpot winner because of this bracket, to take precedence over who's going to win one of the biggest races of the year on the Indianapolis Oval. So I think that's a very important point that he's brought up here.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And we've had one potential piece of that schedule shuffle happen today with the Atlanta thing. But our race is going to be shuffled around here to accommodate the bracket, because you don't want to have the final race of it at a Crown Jewel, be it Indy, be it the Bristol night race, be it the Daytona summer race, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, let's move on here. There's another piece of this puzzle. Obviously, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that still have to come into place in terms of what the coverage is going to look like next year, what this entire tournament's going to look like. But we have been getting some updates this week as well. Amazon Prime's first Cup Series races has long been rumored, fans trying to piece the schedule together with the dates. And we now have confirmation it's going to be the Coca-Cola 600 on May 25th, 2025. They'll also be producing a new 4-part documentary coming in 2025 called Earnhardt. And earlier today, it was announced that TNT's first race back will be at Atlanta Motor Speedway on Saturday, June 28th, 2025, under the lights. It's fitting in some ways because TNT and Turner's based in Atlanta, so they'll kick off NASCAR return in their own backyard. But that also means, Matt, to the point that you were making, that the in-season tournament is kicking off at a drafting super speedway style chaotic racetrack. So what do you think? Is it a good idea to put one of NASCAR's Crown Jewel races on a streaming service in Prime Video? And how do you feel about that track in Atlanta kicking off TNT's return and thus the in-season tournament?
Well, again, to your Stenhouse point from before, I'm not sure any of us, perhaps going into Atlanta week, would have picked Daniel Suarez to win in the spring. So it was a fairly clean race in terms of accidents. We had that one early on, but it can produce people who don't like that style of racing going to the back of the field and then perhaps not coming back through. So their bracket could potentially be over on week one. To the scheduling and sort of TV point of this, good for Amazon to have a Crown Jewel, if you would call it that. I guess people do. I think I've made my point on this clear on multiple outlets that I'm not a fan of the Coke 600, and we should not be going 600 miles with these cars that can clearly do 2,000 miles without breaking down at this point. But they've got themselves a big race to come in and woo people. You can watch the Monaco Grand Prix and Indy during the day, and then you can fire up your Prime, your brand spanking new Prime subscription next year for people that have got it, and watch the 600 into the evening. So obviously that is a big race for you guys. It's one of the big races of the year on Memorial Day weekend. They've got themselves a good one there to kick off that part of the year. Be a shame for again, back to my point from before, season long running thing, but for Fox not to have it. So I guess well, again, more scheduled stuff to come up. I guess you would say that Fox will end their coverage of the year with the All-Star race, if that's the way we're going with things. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see how more scheduling runs through. Good this year, of course. Last year we had the schedule very late. Hopefully this leads to, because we do like a good bit of calendar news, the schedule coming out fairly more sooner than it did last year.
Yeah, I think I kind of hinted at this in the previous part of this segment, but I have, again, limited problems with the in-season tournament. It's just kind of whatever to me at this point, but I have a massive problem with putting the first round at a track like Atlanta, because I think it leaves the door wide open. You're just asking for all sorts of upsets and chaos and controversy, and you do have some added potential for a driver that you don't normally see running up front as often as some of the superstars of a sport that might be able to, even if it's not a win. And nothing against Daniel Suarez, because I know he obviously got the win at Sonoma and he's driving for a solid team in Trackhouse, but he has been behind Ross Chastain a little bit in terms of performance, and I think there were some questions. It sounds like now they're committed to his future, but to your point, Matt, I don't think very many of us were expecting him to go out and win the second points race of the year in the way that he did. And if that had happened next summer, it completely throws a wrench in this entire bracket here. I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, again, I don't like making stick and ball sports comparisons, but that's just the direction that the sport is going down right now, or the series rather. Motorsport is a sport, NASCAR's its own thing. But imagine if March Madness was almost completely randomized in the first round, and you had 2 number 1 seeds go out and 3 number 2 seeds go out in the first round, and 1 number 3 seed lose. Like, I mean, you expect in the opening round there to not be too many upsets, and the majority of the top seeds would advance here. Like you mentioned, Matt, we got a relatively clean race, but if what happened on the opening lap happens on the final lap, and you wad 16 cars up and it completely jumbles the running order, and what does that do to the bracket now? I think if you want to do a bracket like this, you should have different types of tracks, but I don't know that super speedways drafting style tracks should be among them, because of how much of a wild card they are. And of course, it's not a complete wild card, because you do have certain drivers that excel on those types of tracks and that style of racing more than others. But just one wrong move, it doesn't even have to be your fault. If you're in the front, you can be in a wreck. If you're in the back, you can be in a wreck. So I just think it leaves it to be too much of a lottery, specific to be anywhere in this tournament rather, but specifically to be kicking off the tournament. That I'm not a huge fan of. But maybe that's what they want. They want the chaos, they want the upsets, they want to generate as many crazy storylines as possible, and that's probably why they're going with it. I know there's obviously the business aspect of it as well, with it being Turner's home race in many respects, but that I'm not a fan of. I'm also obviously not a fan of all the media fragmentation and the world of streaming and price gouging, and you're hearing that Netflix is buying 2 NFL games for Christmas Day now, and that's another subscription that NFL fans are going to have to buy. Like, it's getting out of control. But I do understand that the technology exists and this is the way of the future. But I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of fans that are not happy with the idea that what's arguably the second or third biggest race of the year is going to be on Amazon Prime rather than over the air on Fox, like it's been for so many years. I think that's probably not going to be universally well received in its own right either.
You could also make potentially point, and again, back to the schedule, we don't know what it's going to be fully yet, but you could say for someone that isn't, or shall I phrase this, isn't perhaps a strong card in their pack, super speedway racing, but gets through that first round against whoever they might be up against in their bracket, and the second race is at Sonoma, and they're not very good at road courses, and you're like, oh well, we got through the first round, but next week we're against AJ Allmendinger and he'll probably beat us, or someone like, or Chase Elliott or someone like that, and then what was the point, But we'll have to wait and see how the schedule plays out for it. You would think they would have one of all of them: super speedway, road course, a short track and a 1.5 miles in there somewhere, perhaps, to keep it across all specters of NASCAR circuit, perhaps? Maybe you, being that it's going to be in the summer, you'd have to think that maybe Chicago, if it continues, would be part of this too.
Matt, you brought up Allmendinger, and just kind of light bulb went off in my head here. I know we have an owners playoffs. We have owners championship standings that we follow. We're still obviously figuring a lot of this out, but it's the top 32 drivers. I don't know. Is there going to be an owners aspect of this? Because what Colleague does with their 16 car, if Sonoma's in the same time period next year as it is this year, like, is that one of the 3 races that determines the seeding? And if Allmendinger goes out and gets a top 5 or wins, or SVG running parts, I mean, who knows what his schedule is going to be next year? But if it's not I don't know. Like, is that a separate bracket that's going to affect, how part-timers? I mean, yeah. How? Yeah. That would be that would make it even more complex. I'd love the owners championship. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important, but if they try to incorporate that into this year, I think that's just a whole nother wrinkle that maybe overcomplicates it. And to your point again, probably not necessary. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to draw up storylines and create something for you and me and everybody else to talk about, but I don't know.
I'm sure we will when it comes to this time next year.
Yeah, we will for sure. But I think I'd like to think we're good enough at our jobs that we can do that without, again, dare I say it, a gimmick like this to create more storylines. There's at least 36 drivers out there every weekend. There's plenty of things to talk about, and I'd like to think we do a pretty good job at telling their stories and highlighting what deserves to be highlighted here. Real quick before we move on, Matthew Owens will be really interested in the 25 Coke 600 ratings. I continue to hear that NASCAR's audience is old, so let's put a race that'll end at 11:30 on a streaming service. Sure. Well, the counter to that, Matthew, is I hear more people are subscribed to Amazon Prime than they are to cable. The only problem with that is the demographics, like you just mentioned. I think NASCAR's fan base and viewership certainly skews a lot older, and I would think more of those streaming subscribers would probably tend to skew a lot younger. So if the majority of the fan base isn't a part of that demographic, then I don't think that's a stat that really matters in the grand scheme of things. It's where does your audience congregate, and I think for NASCAR it's still network television number one, but cable television, traditional TV rather than streaming. I think overall, I don't know. Those numbers are going to be very interesting, but I don't know. Are they contract? I know if it airs on television, they're contractually obligated to put those numbers out. I know that NBC's gotten away with not publicizing the Peacock exclusive IndyCar races. So I would think, given what they've done with the NFL, that those numbers would be available to us, but we'll have to wait and see. I would imagine that if they're worth publicizing, we will know about that. I mean, we know 23 million people watched that NFL game, but with IndyCar, it was in line with our projections, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly right. It will be interesting. And the way that NASCAR's ratings have been going this year, let's hope that does continue on its upward streak. But I guess the way that social media talks about NASCAR's ratings, maybe in the end, they'll have no choice in putting them out.
I think they're stable right now. I think some races have been up, some races have been down. There's positive momentum. I think we've stopped the bleeding in that sense. It's just a matter of, what can we do to try to generate more interest. I think hence what we're seeing right here with this in-season tournament. Will it have the effect that the NASCAR executives wanted to have, though? That's the no pun intended $1 million question here as we look forward to 2025. Still a lot to fall into place, and as I mentioned, we will continue to keep up with all of that and pass that on to you as we continue to react to that as it all comes in. Still over a year before that summer stretch begins for Prime and TNT, so we'll keep our eye on that. In the meantime, Matt, I'll hand it over to you for the latest update in the Grid EPI.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. A very busy weekend in the Grid Endurance Performance Index this weekend. We'll start in Portugal, where the 24 Hours of Portimao was held for the Creventic Series, and it was won by Max Moritz, Vincent Kolb, Robert Renauer, Ralph Bohn, and Felix Neuhofer. Congratulations to them. Only 2 more European races for the Creventic Series to come this year. Staying in Europe, on Saturday at Spa, a truncated Spa 6 hours, which was red flagged after the big accident. Everyone, I'm sure, has seen it doing the rounds on social media for Earl Bamber. With about 2 hours to go, there was a huge red flag, much controversy, and a big win for Jota Sport. Will Stevens and Callum Ilott winning for the Porsche Hertz team after the red flag and pit stops that messed up the order a little bit. Ferrari were not happy that the way that race was ended, but they came home with the win. Did Porsche? They actually came home with a 1-2 with the factory car in second. More on that in a moment. In GT3, it was won by Yasser Shahin, Maurice Schurig, and Richard Leitz for Manfei EMA. At Laguna Seca on Sunday, more hypercar action because the IMSA Series was on its second race in California for the season, and another Porsche win. Nick Tandy and Matthew Jaminet getting the victory for Penske. Lauren Heinrich and Seb Prio also driving a Porsche for the AO team. Rexy winning in GTD Pro. And for the third time from 4 races in GTD this year, Winward Racing were the winners. Russell Ward and Phil Ellis continuing their terrific start to the season. 2 more races to tell you about from the weekend. They were at a very, very melting hot Thailand in Buriram for the GT World Challenge Asia. Marcus Winkelhock and Huao Ru Han winning on Saturday, and Wei Lu and Patrick Pile getting the win on Sunday. This is what it does to the point standings. 39 races down out of 151 as we go into week 7, and fire up the klaxon. We have a brand new leader. Andre Lotterer has jumped ahead of his 2 Porsche WEC teammates, who they are Lawrence Van Voort and Kevin Estre. They were 1 and 2 last week, and Lotterer now becomes eligible with his 3rd start to the year. As you can see, they're on the right hand side. 1 win and 2 seconds. It's a pretty decent start for Porsche. They still hold Porsche alumni drivers there holding 8, if you include Tim Heinemann, 8 of the top 10 places in the grid EPI after 7 weeks. Callum Ilott, big news for him. He's on track at Indy this weekend, and of course he is there in 8th position after his win in the big race at Spa. Coming up this weekend, it's a bit of a more of a quiet week, but still 4 races to add on to week 8 grid EPI. They are at Misano for GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Cup, and in the States at COTA for the latest round of GT World Challenge USA. Bring you the winners for those races next week on the show, where we will look forward on next week's show, of course, to the big weekend of Indy, Monaco, and the Coke 600. Talking of Indy, time to hand back to Kobe. He's got more headlines and he can tell us what is happening at the Speedway. If the clock is still running, it's got about 5 minutes left to go on track action.
Yeah, the clock is still running, but I can tell you what's not running. Cars on track, because we're in yet another rain delay, and it doesn't look like we're going to resume action today because NBC is filling airtime, just going through the Indy 500 fill and interviewing drivers. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to run the final 5 to 10 minutes of this practice session. And it's crazy, after 2 scheduled days of running, we've only ran 5.5 hours of on-track action. But the good news is we have all day tomorrow, Thursday, which is looking like a good day, and then Fast Friday still doesn't look good there weather-wise, but we'll have to wait and see there. And there's still some rain in the forecast for over the weekend, so we'll have to basically be playing the weather by ear. And like I said on yesterday's show, it's better to have it raining now rather than come race day on Memorial Day Sunday. But since it looks like we're all done for the day at Indy, I'm just going to go through the quick rundown. Scott McLaughlin, fastest at 229.493 miles per hour, followed by his Team Penske teammate Will Power. Colton Herta was 3rd. Joseph Newgarden 4th. Alexander Rossi 5th. And you have Kyle Kirkwood, Pato O'Ward, Alex Below, Ryan Hunter-Reay, and Elio Castro-Neves ran out the top 10. Looking at some notables on the time sheet, you got Scott Dixon, who was fastest yesterday on 11th. Graham Rahal in 12th. We all know the story of him last year getting bumped from the Indy 500 field. You got Kyle Larson, the NASCAR Cup Series champion and star, 15th fastest. Takuma Sato in 17th. Roman Grosjean, he was down on the timesheet for a lot throughout the day. He got it up to 18th place. You got Connor Daly in 19th, and Linus Lundqvist in 20th, and Callum Ilott, who's in the 6th car just for the Indy 500. 20th fastest, Marco Andretti 22nd, and then looking down the order outside of the top 30, which is going to be the danger zone of drivers where you don't want to be in the last row shootout. You got Catherine Legg in 31st, followed by Nolan Siegel, Santino Ferrucci, and Augustine Canapito, who was the slowest at 221.628 miles per hour there. So that's your rundown of the Wednesday practice session at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And now time for some more motorsports news from around the world. NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series regular Corey Haim will make another Cup Series start at the end of June after making 2 starts at at Dover in Kansas, replacing the injured Eric Jones in the number 43 Legacy Motor Club Toyota. Heim will drive the number 50 Mobile One Toyota for 2311 racing at Nashville Super Speedway. Steve Laletta, the president of 2311, called Heim an up-and-coming star, and the team is looking forward to working with him in the Music City. Heim himself said he's excited to get behind the wheel of a 2311 Toyota, given how strong they performed on track this year. Graphic courtesy of the team. With Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari in 2025, he's bringing 2 Mercedes team members with him to the Prancing Horse. Ferrari hired Loic Serra and Jerome D'Ambrosio. Serra will become the head of chassis performance engineering, reporting to Enrico Cardal, overseeing various areas in Maranello, including track engineering, aero development, aero operations, and vehicle performance. D'Ambrosio will become deputy team principal, reporting directly to team principal Frederick Vasseur, and he'll also take on the role as head of the Scuderia Ferrari Driver Academy, working with the young Ferrari junior drivers. Serra and D'Ambrosio will start working at Ferrari, effective immediately on October 1st. Photo courtesy of Ferrari. 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion Hall of Famer Jimmy Johnson signed with NBC Sports. Johnson will join their motorsports coverage for a total of 4 races this year. He'll contribute to NBC's coverage of the 108th Indianapolis 500. Doing his own version of the double, Johnson will become the first person to announce the Indy 500 and drive in the Coca-Cola 600. On the same day, he'll also be on NBC's NASCAR broadcast for the Daytona Summer Race, Talladega Fall Race, and the season finale at Phoenix. Plus, he'll also get to contribute to NBC Sports' coverage in select racing, which he'll be competing in as a part-time driver. Williams Racing signed Alex Albon to a multi-year contract extension that will keep the pair together into the new era of Formula One regulations in 2026. Albon said he's incredibly happy to stay with the team, and although they've had a difficult start to the 2024 season, they've made significant progress, and he's seen huge changes behind the scene that could take Williams back to the front of the grid. And I will say that remains to be seen, but Albon calls this a long-term project that he believes in, which is why he decided to sign this contract extension instead of trying to sign with another team, adding that the journey will take time, but he's confident that they're building the right team with the right people to achieve their goals. Graphic courtesy of Williams. And with that said, I'm going to throw it over to Matt for everyone's favorite game, pick a winner.
A shorter than usual pick a winner this week with only Formula One. No sprint race, of course, for the first time in a couple of races there at Imola. Supercars at Perth and the NASCAR All-Star Race at Fort Wilkesboro. We're going to be picking the first race of the weekend on Saturday at Perth for Supercars on the show tonight, and we talked about him earlier in the show. My pick for Saturday in the west of Australia is Will Brown.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Will Brown as well. I think that team is obviously doing some great things right now, and Supercars leading the standing. Seems like that Will Brown is the driver to beat. Brock Feeney is right there along with him. I think Triple H is going to have a great weekend in Perth. Yeah, Ben.
I'm going to defer to the 2 guys that follow the series a little bit more closely than I do. Apologize because I know that you guys are trying to catch me and Matthew and pick a winner right now, but I think I'm going to make it unanimous and go with Will Brown here as well. And especially unanimous, even in our chat, Adam says Will Brown for race 1 at Perth.
So we'll have all of those picks to add up and tot up on the scoreboard once the weekend is complete, and there'll be an update on it on the post-race show on Sunday. Get your nominations in for your race winners on the social medias and use the hashtag pick a winner. 2 Supercars races, Formula One race at Imola and the NASCAR All-Star Race at North Wilkesboro. Time for this week's edition of Hots and Nots. Ben, the floor is yours. What are your hots from the weekend?
Well, I touched on it a little bit on Encore Monday night. We'll talk a little bit more on Women in Motorsports, which is taping tonight after this show. It'll be up probably sometime tomorrow morning or Friday. We'll see where Joe's able to fit that into the schedule. But Isabella Robusto has been very impressive, and I don't want to, put too many super high expectations on her. It's only been 2 ARCA starts, but what she's done with Venturini Motorsports, a full 40-car field at Phoenix, a combo race with ARCA and ARCA West, and to finish in 6th place on debut. Probably could have been a little bit higher. I know she's still working on restarts. She ran as high as 3rd that night. And again, probably if Gio Ruggiero, her teammate, hadn't had an issue at the start of the race that kind of took him out of contention, probably would have finished 3rd behind him and William Sawalich because Ruggiero fell back Swalish won, Robusta was second, and the driver that she was competing against all night was Connor Zilich, who, of course, we've talked on this show and on the Encore show, has been very highly rated as a potential future superstar of a sport. Won some hardware in ARCA this year as well. So, again, I think that, no disrespect to Tony Breidinger and Amber Balkan, who I think have both made a lot of improvement and strides forward in their own right. But I think in 2 races, she is already certainly level with them, if not even a little bit ahead in terms of her driver development and how close she is to potentially winning an ARCA race here. So, again, I'll pump the brakes on, calling her a future superstar of the Cup Series or anything, but I think that she has gotten off to a very, very nice start. And it pains me that she had the concussion and the injury last year, because she was supposed to be making these ARCA starts last year. And she hadn't gotten delayed by almost a full season here. Maybe she'd be full-time this year. And, who knows how much further she'd even be in her development with Toyota and whatever future plans she has. But she has been very impressive in ARCA so far. Definitely worthy of my hot for this segment this week.
I've got 2, and one of them is also a Women in Motorsport based hot. And it was a follow-on from last week where I said Abby Pulling has taken the reins in F1 Academy by winning those 2 races at Miami. She guest drove at the weekend at Brands Hatch in the British Formula 4 Championship and became the first female driver to win in the British Formula 4 Championship on guest debut. So congratulations to Abby. She is flying at the moment. Another hot was the MotoGP race at Le Mans. I was super impressed at Jerez a couple of weeks ago. What a great race it was there. But again, Le Mans on Sunday was tremendous. It was a bit of a Ducati Cup race with Martin Bagnaia and Marquez all on Ducatis at the front, but the crowd was almost sensational. They had 300,000 people through the gate over the weekend, and they were treated to a spectacle of a race on Sunday for the Grand Prix. So that's my hots. I'm not really sure I've got many knots. I've got one, and while I'm on MotoGP, I'll quickly roll my knot out. I've mentioned this before in this section this year. The TV direction for MotoGP at times can be brilliant, but at times can be absolutely atrocious. And in Moto 2, they missed Sergio Garcia winning the race because there was a battle for 3rd and 4th going on. But show the winner crossing the line, please. Even if it's in the small box at the top, just show the winner winning the race. That's what we're here to see, is someone come home and win. And they, again, butchered the end of that race to show the battle for, I think it was 4th and 5th in the end. But yeah, well done to Sergio Garcia, if you saw him cross the line to win.
Again, I apologize, because I'm sure a lot of people, knowing how I feel about playoffs and stages and overtime, expected me to go off on the in-season tournament during this not segment here. And I'm sorry, I just don't have the energy to do that. I'm completely indifferent, and it's just kind of whatever to me at this point. So instead, I will say my not is the weather at IMS. I mean, again, we did our best today. Of course, there's obviously some storylines, all throughout the field, and every team is, got their own goals that they're trying to accomplish and achieve, and drivers with different stories to talk about. But it'd be a lot easier to put the script together for tonight's show if we had more laps in and, the potential for more things to talk about in terms of the on-track action. We haven't gotten very much of that the last couple of races. So, it's not a massive deal. I'd rather it happen now than on race day, especially given what we're seeing this year with, I guess, not just Kyle Larson doing a double. Jimmy Johnson's, going to have some travel double with this new deal with NBC. But I hope that we're getting it all out of our system now, and that when it comes time for race day, we can continue the stretch of good weather we've had in the last few years. I remember 2019, the weather did not look very good, and we still got the full race in without issue, without delay. So hopefully, especially for Larson's sake this year, it's a nice, clean race. There aren't too many incidents. Hopefully, it's a clean green flag run to the finish, and we don't have to worry about 3 red flags in the final 20 laps, and he can get on his plane to Charlotte for the Coke 600, and we'll see what he can do there. But yeah, it would be nice to have some more track time. I think Larson was even saying that today. He obviously is used to being in an environment where he doesn't get a lot of practice with what he has done in NASCAR the last couple of years, especially. But yeah, that's really the only knot I have for this week is could we just get some cars on track without having to be interrupted by rain and by weather so often over these last couple of days. Hopefully, the forecast for the rest of the next week and a half looks good.
Yeah, hopefully so. And it looks like tomorrow might be pretty clear. So hopefully we can get a full day for everybody. One hot that I forgot, which I'll quickly come back to, was young Scott Ronan Pearson picking up his first British Touring Car Championship win at Brands Hatch at the weekend, and just starting his second season in the category, and now he's got a trophy to put on his mantelpiece. So that was a pleasant surprise to see. He did get a bit of a luck with the reverse draw of the grid, but you've got to go out and win the race, and he certainly did that on Sunday. I know Josh would have backed me up on that if he was here, and Josh has just come off a mammoth rain delay / Indy practice coverage, so hopefully he'll be part of our wrap-up show for it tomorrow, and we'll have to wait and see what kind of running we get tomorrow. But as I said, it looks like it might be fairly decent. Let's hope, keep our fingers crossed for that.
All right, and I see one hot coming in from a chat with our friend Matthew. Her hot to just have cars on track at Indianapolis. Always such a beautiful sight. Can't wait for qualifying, the greatest qualifying session in motorsports. I think that is objective fact. This is the only race where it doesn't matter if you're a rookie trying to make your debut. Like, I mean, it feels kind of weird to call Kyle Larson a rookie, but in this series, what he's trying to do, with a one-off entry and trying to qualify for this race, or if you're, Scott Dixon or Will Power, multi-time champions, former winners of this race. We saw it last year with Graham Rahal, driving for a team that you would expect to maybe not be a top contender every year, but certainly be solidly in the field, a full-timer. And, the track, it doesn't care. This race doesn't care. You have to come back. You have to earn your spot every year. And I hope and pray with these charter rumors that is not part of a deal, that we lose that tradition here, because, again, you want to make the comparison to NASCAR. 90% of a starting lineup, well, not the lineup, but who they're going to be at least months before the race even happens, because who has the charters, who's locked in. And it takes a lot away from the duels, I think, that there's really only a couple of cars that you're keeping an eye on for that battle. Whereas here, it could be absolutely anybody. From the part-timers to the one-offs to the full-timers, it doesn't matter. And yeah. I agree. Those 4 laps, the most important 4 laps of some of these drivers' careers to this point, and the greatest qualifying session in motorsports, no doubt.
Yeah, I concur.
And Matt, unless you have anything else to add, I will roll into the closing here.
Oh, I think we're pretty much done. Thanks for everyone for joining us as always tonight, and let's get out of here.
Coming up in an hour even here. Nice even time for this show here. Let's take a look at our upcoming schedule before we sign off for tonight. We'll be on the air with this show again, our special coverage of Indy 500 Practice Week, continuing here tomorrow and Friday to recap, hopefully, some more on-track time than we've gotten the last couple of days. But stay tuned for that. Like I mentioned, Women in Motorsports will be back sometime over the next couple of days as well. We'll be taping that in just a couple of hours. Saturday, Grid Live pre-race will be on the air at noon Eastern. Grid Live wrap-up to follow on Sunday, early in the afternoon, to recap the Supercars races from Perth and F1's Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at Imola. And then I will be back on Monday for Grid Encore. We will recap the Truck and Cup Series All-Star race at North Wilkesboro, and then the Formula 2 and Formula 3 races at Imola. So stay tuned for that. And subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of it. Thank you again for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. Now we're on the road to 2,000. Every bit helps. Hit the bell icon to get notifications every time we go on the air or upload a new video. And follow us on all of our social media platforms as well. And visit our website, gridranking.com. Now, if you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take 5 minutes after the show to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Join Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, who invest each month in the Grid Network. We encourage you to join these fine folks who help keep us on the air. And once we hit $500 per month, we can begin to send our team to the track to cover more races. And that will help us expand our coverage on an even more regular basis for you, the viewers. Link to that is in the video description box below, as it is for Buy Me a Coffee. If you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can get your name on this board right here. Invest as much as you want. Consider buying a specific on-air personality a cup of coffee, and they will thank you on the air. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can also support us by donating during our live streams through the Super Chat feature. For Kobe Lambeth and Matt White from Grid Endurance Performance Index, I'm Ben Schneider from Grid Encore and LastCar.info in for Joshua Birch tonight. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.